Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. It's Laura on the WOW Embossing channel, and I'm back today with a really quick and easy fun card that would be perfect for teenagers or those adults in your life that still love gaming. So I'm going to be using the gorgeous new quad of fruit puffs. So there's cucumber puff, watermelon puff, bilberry puff and banana puff, and they look really bright and vibrant in their containers, but you can see from the swatches on the lids that they kind of turn into more of a pastel colour when they're heat set. And if you've not used puff powders before, basically when you heat set them, they puff up and they give you a little bit of dimension. So these are really fun to play with. There's lots of different techniques that you could do with them, but today we're going to be using this retro gamer stamp from Funky Fossil Designs. It's a bit of a Space Invader themed stamp and I absolutely love it. So first of all, I'm going to mount it to a cling block. Now for this technique, because we're going to be stamping onto black cardstock today, and black card is notoriously known to be quite absorbent, you want to make sure that your embossing ink pad is really juicy. I'm just using an anti-static powder bag on my black cardstock because I know I've had my fingers all over it and I don't want any grease or cream from my hands to transfer to the card and then cause the embossing powder to stick to that. So I'm just inking up my stamp now using the embossing ink, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp it onto the black cardstock, making sure that I've got lots of even pressure. If you don't feel confident using a stamping block, then you could definitely use a stamping tool. I just love my Thin Lizzy blocks and I'm a bit lazy when it comes to my stamping platform. So yeah, this works for me. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add some of the puff powders to my cardstock, and I'm going to add a little bit of each of the colours. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow those colours to kind of merge into each other and you get a really fun effect. And you can do this with any of your embossing powders. Don't be afraid to mix the colours together. I'm only using a little bit of my powders today, so I'm not worried about the excess that's going to be all mixed up. I actually have an empty embossing jar which I'm going to put it into, and then that way I've got a custom blend for another project. So don't be afraid to do that. Of course you could tap off the excess after each colour and then pop those all back into their individual jars, but because I wanted the colours to kind of run into each other, I chose not to do that today. And of course you can always go over it again with another colour of powder just to make sure that you've got all of those gaps filled in. Next, we can go ahead and heat set it. So my heat tool's already heated up on the hottest setting, which is number 2. And I'm just heat setting the powders from underneath. Because the puff powders are quite chunky and because they expand as you heat them, you really want to heat set these from underneath. And of course, because we're using black cardstock and coloured powders, you don't want bits of colour where you haven't got your stamped image. So once they're all caught underneath, then you can go ahead and just finish it off on the top. And you can see there, we've got that gorgeous puffed up stamped image. Now you can see on the black cardstock that we've got this kind of white fluffy creaminess. This is basically the raising agents that's in the embossing powder, and it's just kind of stuck lightly onto the cards. And all we're going to do is take a paintbrush and brush it off. So this is why it's really important to make sure that your powder is completely heat set. And then once the powder is completely heat set and cooled down a little bit, you can then take the paintbrush and brush off all that fluffy raising agent that's stuck to the card, and then that just really kind of brings out the embossed image. It removes that kind of creaminess, and then you're left with a really lovely crisp embossed panel, as you can see there. So to finish off this card, I'm going to add a sentiment from the Game On stamp set from Funky Fossil Designs. The sentiment says, "A day without video games is like," just kidding, I have no idea. So this is a really good sentiment, especially for teenagers. And we're going to go ahead and just ink it up with some black VersaFine Clear ink, and we can go ahead and stamp that in the bottom right hand corner. Just a little tip when you're stamping, I think sometimes in videos it looks like the stamped image happens really quickly, but in reality it can take a few seconds. I like to make sure that I've got a good contact with the card from the stamp, and I also like to leave the stamp on the cardstock for a few seconds just so that that ink can get captured on the cardstock. So sometimes if you stamp too quickly, you will end up with patchy stamping, or it doesn't stamp very crisp. So if you are struggling, and this is the same with your embossing ink as well, just make sure that you hold the image on the card for a few seconds just so that you've transferred the ink and you've got a really good coverage. So I've just cut a diagonal section off of this panel. I've added some foam tape on the back. I'm going to add a little bit of liquid glue so that we've got a little bit of wiggle room, and then we can go ahead and stick that onto our card front. And then that is the card finished for today. So thank you so much for joining me here on the WOW Embossing channel. I really hope that you've enjoyed seeing this card come together and how to use the new puff powders from WOW. There's definitely lots of fun ways that you can incorporate these powders into your card making. I was thinking about stamps like cupcakes and things like that. You could definitely use these powders to add a little bit of detail to the frosting, things like that. So there's lots of fun ways that you can use them. As always, all the products that I've used will be linked in the description box below. And if you're not already subscribed to the WOW channel, then do consider subscribing. There's so many great tips and tricks for how to use your embossing powders, so it's really worth keeping up to date with those. If you want to find me on my own channel, then I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.